right, on our phone now is Dan, the serial rapist.
All right.
Dan claims...
Why is Dan calling us?
Dan is calling us because he's upset about something. Okay. Is that right, Dan?
Excuse me?
I say, Dan, you're calling us because you're upset about something, but I'll reveal that later in the interview.
Yes, that's quite correct.
Yes. Dan claims to have raped over 100 women.
Dan, where are you in the country?
I live in downstate Illinois, 100 miles or so south of Chicago.
All right. And he is a 43-year-old man. And...
Would you be a white man?
Yes, I am.
Yes, he is a white man, Robin. And Dan, as you all might agree, his penis should be cut off. But that's not what we're here to find out. We're here to find out about what is in the mind of a serial rapist.
Yes, how did this happen?
Right. Now, Dan, if you notice, Dan will sound quite rational and stuff. Because,
seems all right, yeah.
Because, Dan, of course, most guys who rape don't necessarily look or sound like rapists. Isn't that true?
That's quite correct, as a matter of fact,
They
yes.
don't fit a stereotype.
And your first sexual experience was a rape that you committed at the age of, what, 17?
Give or take a year or so. To the best of my recollections, yes, that's correct. And it was before I'd even had my first consensual sexual experience.
That's what I was wondering. So that was the very first sexual encounter?
Yes, at around 17 years old. And how did it happen? How did you come to serial rape someone, the first rape?
The very first one, and mind you, these go back about 20 years in time, so I've never been able to accurately determine exactly which one might be first. I've got it narrowed down in my memories to maybe 2 or 3, but the one that I believe is the first was an occasion when I was hitchhiking from point A to point B, and it was at nighttime, and some lady stopped and picked me up. We drove for approximately 100 miles down the road, and I'll sparing you all the sordid details. I decided to make my move at the end of that trip when she stopped along a place on the side of the road to let me out.
And when
Do you use a weapon?
No, on that particular occasion I did not.
Yeah, it's easy for you to overpower. Are you a big, powerful guy?
I stand 6'2", and I weigh about 215. Even back then, I was a good 200 pounds.
All right. So when she stopped the car, you what did you do?
Well, I was in the passenger side, of course, and obviously she's driving the car. My backpack that I was hitchhiking with, this was the final leg of a long journey, mind you, was behind the driver's seat. I got out of the car. I walked over to get my backpack out of the seat immediately behind her. And on that very first occasion, it was kind of a snap decision, a spur-of-the-moment type thing.
Did it take you by surprise? Had you had fantasies of rape before that, or it just totally took you by surprise that you were going to rape her?
No, I had entertained those kinds of fantasies for years, ever since ever since the time of my earliest teenage years.
And you never were successful with women?
Well, I'd never gotten to the point where I'd really made an effort. As I say, this was before my first consensual sexual experience.
So let me understand something.
Yes?
So she stops the car, and all of a sudden you say on a snap decision, she was attractive, I guess, to you. Does a woman have to be attractive in order for you to want to rape her?
In my particular case, yes, although that's not necessarily true with all rapists.
Okay, so you found her attractive, and then all of a sudden you dragged her out of the car? Did you ask her to step outside? What did you do?
I guided her out of the vehicle. I reached her door was open, and her window was open. I reached in, opened the door, and I guided her to a wooded area outside of the vehicle, maybe 20 yards from the car. And
what do you mean guided her? Like, why did she get out? Did you say to her?
Well, when I say guided, what I mean is that I put my arm around her and physically escorted her out of the vehicle.
I see.
So you're dragging her?
Not really dragging. I guess she was kind of stunned by the situation. She may very well understand. She just sort of walked along with me. It wasn't a case of dragging her so much.
Do most of your victims resist in any way, or they just go along with it?
There have been a few who have resisted with varying degrees of severity. The vast majority are simply stunned into acquiescence.
Mm-hmm. And how long does the act usually take? Is it quick?
Yes. A rapist, when he commits an assault, is in such a worked-up state of mind that usually it takes maybe 15 to 20 seconds from the time penetration occurs until...
Right, so you're never interested in satisfying the woman in your fantasies. You're not going to give her such great sex that she's going to fall in love with you. It's all about your quick gratification.
On one level, yes, and there's a lot more to it than that, of course.
Do you ever fantasize that they'll fall in love with you?
No.
You do not. You don't want that.
They want this at all.
Well, that just seems entirely unrealistic.
Do you like it better when they cry and scream and beg you for mercy?
No, actually, I prefer them to remain totally silent and more or less motionless.
I see.
So if they cry and scream, what happens?
If they cry and scream, I would, and there certainly have been instances such as this. I'll still conclude the act. It's just but it's more distasteful to me because there's a certain degree of reality. You practice these. What I'm trying to say is that you rehearse these things in fantasy for many years before you actually attempt to make the process.
Right.
And you visualize things proceeding in a certain fashion. If something occurs which had never occurred in your fantasies, the situation takes on certain overtones of reality, which can be very distasteful because all of a sudden you realize, hey, maybe I am hurting something here.
Right. When you rape a woman, do you ever consider, well, this is someone's daughter or this is a person who has feelings? None of that enters into it. You don't feel any remorse afterwards?
Yes, I have felt some measures of remorse afterwards, which is not all that of an unusual thing. As far as thinking about this as somebody's wife or daughter or something, those kinds of thoughts can make the whole situation seem very unappealing. And so what people such as myself tend to do is immediately discard those kinds of thoughts. You want to think of the woman as being purely an object for your own gratification.
And after you do this act, like in the example of the one with the car, what did you do? Did you run off or did you take her car?
Oh, no, I didn't take the car. I've never stolen anything from any of the victims. Well, that's kind of a...
That would be wrong.
Let me rephrase that. Yeah. Let me rephrase that. I've never taken anything as far as money or jewelry or their cars or
Have you ever killed anyone?
No, I simply, after this particular assault, after this first assault, I simply went and got my backpack and started walking down the road. A moment later, I saw the car drive away in a hurried state in the opposite direction, and I continued my hitchhiking.
And you weren't nervous that the police would be called or anything?
Well, this was such a remote. This was I think in Missouri, or it might have been the southernmost part of Illinois. I was on the return leg of a long trip, and that didn't really worry me at the time because it was the middle of the night. I could have seen any approaching a vehicle that came from the distance, and had plenty of time to have sought cover in the woods.
And there was no traumatic event in your life, like in your childhood, that might account for this behavior. Is that true?
Well,
sort of.
I'm wondering why is he loose and fancy-free at 17?
Excuse me?
Well, he was hitchhiking.
Yeah, but, was there... But it seems like he was just on a road. Yeah. Like no family.
You had your parents, I assume? You were just on a quick hitchhiking trip?
I made a number of cross-country hitchhiking trips beginning when I was 16. When I was 16, I got myself a backpack, and when all was done and said, over a period of a couple of years, I had thumbed myself across country on 6 separate occasions.
Right. So you see, getting back to my question, you said that there was nothing in your childhood that could even possibly give you reason to rape.
Well, there was a combination of things that occurred to me. There was nothing traumatic. You know, when I was in prison in 1990, I was convicted of a crime that stemmed from a failed assault, and I was sentenced to 12.5 years in the Illinois Department of Corrections.
You tried to rape a woman, and you failed, and then she gave a description to the police, and you went out that same night and tried to rape again, and the police caught you.
No, actually, I had made it all the way home after the failed assault, which occurred not too far from where I was living at that time. I made it all the way back home, but I was in such a worked-up state of mind that I decided I was going to go out and hire the services of a prostitute in order to act out the rest of the fantasy, which is something I had never done before.
Right.
And it was because I left the residence and got my car and was driving around about an hour after the assault, and obviously there was an all-points bulletin out for me. Mm-hmm. I was spotted, apprehended, jailed, and convicted a year and a half.
Were you raped in prison at all?
Excuse me?
Were you ever raped in prison?
No, I certainly expected to be. This was my first time of incarceration, and I thought this thing was pretty much par for the course. But as I discovered upon actually going into prison, the version of prison that Hollywood presents us with and that which actually occurs are two very different things.
So you didn't have any problems in prison?
No, most of those types of problems occur in your maximum security institutions, and I was in medium and minimum security the whole time.
So you were never caught for any of the crimes that you're confessing to right now, and the fact is you don't even worry about it because of the statute of limitations.
Yes, it's been over 9 years, Howard, since I committed my last assault.
So you stopped this?
Excuse me?
You stopped raping?
During the time that I was in prison, I immediately began to work with the institutional psychiatrists who were made available, realizing that I had a deep-rooted problem. 4 years into those one-on-one therapeutic sessions, it was suggested to me that I voluntarily enroll myself in what was then a brand-new state-of-the-art recovery program designed specifically for the rehabilitation of sex offenders, be they child molesters or rapists of adult males or females. It's a voluntary thing. You can't be forced into it. I did submit myself to this. I spent the last 17 months of my incarceration in this facility, and I developed the tools that are required for conducting the affairs of my life in a way in which I do not have to repeat actions as bad.
So in other words, are you a good-looking guy? I mean, or is it very difficult for you to get women, or that doesn't play into it?
Well, I don't know if I'm really qualified to judge my own looks. I wouldn't say that I'm ugly or
Are
bad
women
looking.
attracted to you? I mean, do you find that, you know,